Priest follows mute boy after Mass and discovers a little school inside a shack. Father Michael watched uneasily at the strange movement that happened every Sunday morning at the small St. Patrick's Church in the Newtown neighborhood on the outskirts of Cleveland. For 3 months, a boy who looked about 12 years old would always arrive alone for the 7 o'clock Mass, sit in the last pew, and leave discreetly even before the final blessing. On that June Sunday, when the boy stood up once again during the sermon and walked toward the side door, the priest couldn't contain his curiosity. The boy carried a worn cloth bag and, unlike other Sundays, looked directly at the altar before leaving, as if he wanted to etch that moment into his memory. Father Michael paused his speech for a few seconds, apologized to the congregation, and asked them to keep praying while he checked if everything was all right. He left through the sacristy and managed to spot the boy walking hurriedly down the dirt road that led to the cluster of modest homes in the area. The boy stopped in front of a plywood shack that seemed hastily built. The planks were misaligned, and the tin roof had several poorly patched seams. What caught the priest's attention was how carefully the boy checked to make sure no one was watching before entering. Father Michael hid behind a flowering tree growing in the vacant lot next door. From there he could see the side of the shack through a small glassless window, covered only by a patterned fabric curtain swaying in the morning breeze. What he saw left him completely astonished. The boy stood before 4 other children sitting on makeshift stools made of wooden crates. On the back wall was a handmade blackboard, crafted with dark paint applied directly to the wood. The most striking part was how the boy communicated. His gestures were precise and expressive, as if every movement of his hands told a whole story. The other children responded with the same sign language, though more basic, clearly still learning. "Mrs. Barbara, do you know who that boy is?" the priest asked a woman passing by carrying a basin of wet clothes. "Oh, Father, that's Ethan. Lives over there in the little blue house with his mother, Jennifer. The boy hasn't spoken since he was little, poor thing. But he's very smart, you know. I always see him with books under his arm. And those other children in the shack?" Mrs. Barbara looked around and lowered her voice, as if sharing a secret. "They're the children of the garbage pickers, Father. Johnny, Emily, little Amy, and Tyler. Their parents work at the dump from dawn and only come back in the late afternoon. The kids are left wandering the streets, you know. But lately, I've noticed they spend their mornings in that shack." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The priest thanked her for the information and kept watching for a few more minutes. Through the window, he saw Ethan pointing to drawings he had made on the board, simple geometric shapes, numbers, and a few letters. The children paid full attention, as if it were the most important thing in the world. Suddenly, one of the children, a girl about 8 years old, stood up and began making animated gestures. Ethan smiled and nodded approvingly. The girl then went to the board and managed to write the number 5 with white chalk. Father Michael felt a tightness in his chest. Those children were learning, and Ethan, despite being unable to speak, had found a way to teach. But how had a 12-year-old boy learned sign language? And where did the school supplies come from? He decided to return to the church before his absence was noticed by the congregation. For the rest of the Mass, he couldn't concentrate properly. His mind was on that makeshift shack and those 5 children who somehow had found a path to education. After Mass, Father Michael sought out Mrs. Jennifer, Ethan's mother. She was helping organize the church pews, a volunteer job she'd done for years. "Mrs. Jennifer, may I speak with you for a moment?" The woman, thin with prematurely graying hair at 40, seemed nervous. "Of course, Father. Did I do something wrong?" No, it's about Ethan. I've noticed him leaving Mass early and I'm concerned. Is everything all right with him?" Jennifer averted her gaze and began fidgeting with her hands. "Ethan has always been different, Father. Ever since his father left when he was 5, he hasn't spoken a word. I took him to doctors, psychologists, everyone I could. They said it's trauma, that maybe with time he'll speak again." "I understand. And where does he go to school?" The question seemed to make Jennifer even more uncomfortable. "Well, Father, that's a complicated situation. Ethan has tried 3 different schools. Because of his mutism, the teachers don't know how to handle him. They said he needs a special school, but the nearest one is across town, and I can't take him every day. So he's not in school right now? Officially, no, but the boy is very smart, Father. He learns everything on his own. He borrows books from the public library and reads for hours. And lately... She stopped. Lately what, Mrs. Jennifer? Father, promise you won't judge me? Of course not. I'm here to help. Jennifer took a deep breath before continuing. Ethan found some videos online at Mr. Harold's internet cafe about sign language. He fell in love with the idea of being able to communicate better. He spent all the money he'd saved from odd jobs to pay for internet time and learn. What odd jobs? He helps Dave from the bakery load bread on Saturday mornings, organizes books at the library once a week. He's very responsible. And now, she hesitated again. You can tell me, Mrs. Jennifer. Father, I know Ethan is teaching other children in that shack on the vacant lot. I know I should stop him, but those kids have no one. Their parents work all day, and they're left on the streets. At least there, they're learning something. Father Michael was struck by the woman's honesty. He could see she was torn between fear of her son getting into trouble and pride in seeing him help other children. Have you seen how this school works? Yes, Father. And it moved me. Ethan made cardboard signs with letters and numbers. He got some donated children's books and even found chalk. The kids love it. For the first time in their lives, they're learning to read and write. But is the shack safe? That's my fear, Father. The structure isn't good. When it rains hard, it leaks everywhere. And now that winter's coming, it'll be difficult. But Ethan is determined to keep going. Father Michael grew thoughtful. He knew the reality of those families well. The parents worked so hard just to survive that they had no time to oversee their children's education, and the public system, despite its efforts, couldn't meet all the special needs. Mrs. Jennifer, may I make a suggestion? Of course, Father. How about I take a closer look at Ethan's project? Maybe the church can help in some way. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. You'd do that? Of course. Education is one of the church's most important missions. And if a boy is teaching other children voluntarily, that's a miracle we should support. On Monday morning, Father Michael decided to pay an official visit to the shack. He arrived around 9 o'clock and gently knocked on the makeshift door. Ethan answered and was clearly surprised to see the priest. He gestured, asking if he had done something wrong. No, Ethan. I came because I heard about the wonderful work you're doing. May I come in? The boy hesitated for a moment, glanced back at the other children, and then nodded. The inside of the shack was even more precarious than Father Michael had imagined. The floor was dirt. There were only 4 crates for seats, and a table made of a plank resting on 2 sawhorses. But what stood out most was the organization. All the books were neatly lined up on a makeshift shelf. The chalkboard was clean, and the children sat quietly, clearly respectful of the priest's presence. Good morning, children. I'm Father Michael from St. Patrick's Church. The 4 children responded in unison, their voices shy but polite. Good morning, Father. Ethan stood by the chalkboard and began gesturing to the children. One of them, the oldest boy, translated, Teacher Ethan wants to know if you came here to shut down our school. The question pained the priest's heart. Those children were so afraid of losing their only access to education that they saw any authority as a threat. No, not at all. I came to learn more and see how I can help. The relief on the children's faces was immediate. Ethan made a few more gestures and smiled timidly. Teacher Ethan wants to show you what we've already learned, translated the youngest girl, who couldn't have been more than 7. For the next hour, Father Michael witnessed one of the most beautiful lessons of his life. Ethan had created his own teaching method, combining sign language, drawings, and gestures. The children were learning not just letters and numbers, but also values like respect, patience, and cooperation. When the lesson ended and the children went outside to play, Father Michael stayed behind with Ethan. The boy pulled an old notebook from his bag and showed it to the priest. It contained notes about each child, what they already knew, their struggles, and even drawings they had made. The priest was moved by the care and dedication of this 12-year-old boy. Ethan wrote in the notebook, Father, they deserve to learn. It's not their fault they were born poor. At that moment, Father Michael knew he had found his mission. No matter what obstacles arose, he would help Ethan continue his work. But when he returned to the church that afternoon, he discovered the challenges would be greater than he expected. Sister Margaret, the parish administrator and the person in charge of the church's finances, was waiting in his office with a stern expression. "Father Michael, I need to speak with you about a delicate matter." Sister Margaret was 68 and had managed the parish for over 2 decades. She was a capable and dedicated woman, but also very strict when it came to rules and procedures. "Of course, sister. What is it?" "I've received word that you've been involved in activities not authorized by the diocese. Something about children in a shack." Father Michael realized someone had talked about his visit. In a small community, news traveled fast. "It's true, sister. I discovered an informal educational project and am looking into ways to support it." "Father, you know any social initiative by the church must go through diocesan approval. We can't be involved in projects that don't meet safety and legal protocols." "I understand your concern, sister, but we're talking about children with no access to formal education. A 12-year-old boy is teaching 4 others to read and write. How can I ignore that?" "Father, my duty is to protect the church from legal troubles. If one of these children gets hurt in that shack, the responsibility could fall on the parish, and if the project doesn't have authorization from the proper authorities, we could have issues with the government." Sister Margaret wasn't being cruel. Father Michael knew that. She was doing her job of protecting the institution, but he also knew that if they waited for all the protocols and approvals, those children could lose precious years of learning. "Sister, give me a week to speak with the proper authorities and see how we can formalize the situation. But I ask that you don't take any drastic measures yet. 1 week, Father. After that, if we don't have an official solution, I'll have to advise you to step away from the project." That night, Father Michael barely slept. He knew a week was far too little time to resolve bureaucratic matters that usually took months. But he also knew he couldn't give up on those children. On Tuesday morning, he decided to speak with the parents of the children studying in the shack. He needed to better understand each family's situation and see if there was a way they could work together. First, he visited the home of Johnny, a 10-year-old boy and the son of Terence, a recyclables collector. The house was simple but clean, with just 2 rooms and a small backyard where Terence sorted the materials he gathered. "Mr. Terence, I came to talk about Johnny." The man, around 40, stopped sorting cans and looked worried. "Did the boy do something wrong, Father?" "No, quite the opposite. I came to talk about the lessons he's been taking with Ethan." Terence's face lit up. "Oh, Father, you can't imagine the joy of seeing my son learning. I never had the chance to study. I left school in 3rd grade to help my father on the farm. I always dreamed Johnny would have a better life." "And why isn't he in a regular school?" Terence sighed and sat on a crate. "Father, I tried enrolling him in the neighborhood school, but they require documents I don't have, a uniform I can't afford, and schedules that don't work for our family. I leave at 5 in the morning for work and don't get back until 6 in the evening. My wife works as a housekeeper and is also gone all day." "I see, and how do you feel about these lessons with Ethan?" "Father, it's a miracle. The boy comes home telling me everything he's learned. He already knows how to write his name and is learning math. Even I'm picking up a few things from him." The conversations with the other parents were similar. They were all hard-working people who wanted the best for their children, but faced barriers that seemed insurmountable. The system was there, but it didn't reach them. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. On Wednesday, Father Michael decided to visit the principal of the nearest public school, Mrs. Sharon, a respected educator in the area. He hoped she could guide him on how to formalize the children's situation. "Father, I'm very familiar with this reality," Mrs. Sharon said when he explained the situation. "We get many children with similar backgrounds. The problem is our system isn't fully equipped to handle all their unique needs." "But could these children be enrolled?" "Yes, but it would require an adjustment period. As for Ethan, his case is more complex. He'd need a psychoeducational evaluation to determine the best approach. How long would that take? At least 3 months, considering the wait times for evaluations and the enrollment process. 3 months. Father Michael knew Sister Margaret wouldn't grant that much time. And more importantly, was it fair to interrupt those children's learning for 3 months while waiting for the bureaucracy? Mrs. Sharon, what if we created a partnership? The church could offer a temporary space for classes while we arranged the necessary paperwork. The principal seemed interested in the proposal. That could be possible as long as we had a qualified teacher in charge. What if Ethan continued teaching but under the supervision of a professional? Father, I'll be honest with you. I've heard some rumors about this boy. They say he has a special gift for teaching. If that's true, it would be a shame to waste that talent. But we'd need to do everything by the book. When Father Michael returned to the church, he found a surprise that would change the entire course of the story. In the churchyard stood Ethan, accompanied by his mother and a well-dressed man he didn't recognize. "Father, this is Dr. Richard," said Mrs. Jennifer. "He's a psychologist and said he wants to learn about Ethan's work." Dr. Richard stepped forward and greeted the priest. "Father Michael, I'm Richard Bennett, a psychologist specializing in special education. I work with the city's Department of Education. I heard about Ethan's case from Mrs. Sharon and came to see his work firsthand." "That's wonderful, Doctor. We were just looking for ways to formalize the situation. Actually, Father, I come with a proposal. We're implementing a pilot program for inclusive education in the city. We're looking for young people with a talent for teaching who can be trained as educational aides. Ethan's profile is exactly what we need." Father Michael felt a mix of hope and concern. How would this work? Ethan would receive formal training in pedagogy and sign language. Afterward, he could officially work as an aide in public schools. It would be a recognized profession with a salary and benefits. And the children he's already teaching? They'd be enrolled in the Accelerated Learning Program. They'd continue studying with Ethan, but now within an official framework. It sounded too good to be true. Father Michael looked at Ethan, who was excitedly gesturing to his mother. "He's asking if this means he can keep teaching," translated Mrs. Jennifer. "Yes, he can," replied Dr. Richard, speaking directly to Ethan and making a few basic signs. "And he can learn even more to teach better." Ethan's face lit up with a smile Father Michael had never seen before. It was the expression of someone who had just discovered their dreams were possible. But on Thursday morning, Father Michael found out not everything would be so simple. Sister Margaret called him into her office with an even graver expression than before. "Father, I received a call from the diocese. Archbishop Thomas wants a meeting with you tomorrow to discuss your unofficial activities." The priest's heart raced. Archbishop Thomas was known for his strict adherence to protocol and his concern for the church's image. "Sister, can you tell me what was reported to the diocese?" "Father, someone made an anonymous complaint saying you're using church resources for unauthorized activities and putting children at risk. But I haven't used any church resources yet. I only visited the children." "I know, Father, but the complaint was made. Now we have to deal with the consequences." Father Michael knew this meeting could determine the end of his involvement in the project. Archbishop Thomas didn't tolerate controversy, and if he decided the project was a risk to the church, he'd order the priest to step away completely. That afternoon, he decided to make one last visit to the shack. He wanted to say goodbye to the children in case Friday's meeting didn't go well. When he arrived, he found a scene that moved him deeply. Ethan had taught the children to sing a religious song in sign language. It was a version of Amazing Grace adapted with simple gestures they could perform. The 5 children lined up and began to sing for the priest. There was no sound, only the graceful movement of their hands telling the story of the song. But the emotion conveyed was so intense that Father Michael felt tears streaming down his face. When they finished, Ethan wrote in his notebook, "Father, thank you for believing in us. If we have to stop, at least we know someone saw our work." That night, Father Michael prayed as he hadn't in years. He asked for wisdom for the meeting the next day and strength to fight for those children, even if it cost him his position in the church. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at the diocesan headquarters. Father Michael arrived promptly, and was greeted by Archbishop Thomas's secretary, an efficient woman who led him to the bishop's office. Archbishop Thomas was an imposing man of 70, with white hair and a piercing gaze that seemed to read the intentions of anyone before him. He had overseen the diocese for 15 years and was respected for his intelligence and firmness. "Father Michael, have a seat. We need to talk about your recent activities." "Yes, Archbishop Thomas." "I've received reports that you've been involved in an educational project not authorized by the diocese. Is this true?" Father Michael decided to be completely honest. "It's true, Archbishop Thomas. I discovered that a 12-year-old boy has been teaching other underprivileged children in a shack. I felt it was my moral duty to support this initiative." "Father, you understand that any social project of the Church must follow specific protocols, don't you? We have legal and institutional responsibilities." "I understand, Archbishop Thomas, but I also understand that our mission is to serve those most in need. These children have no access to formal education." Archbishop Thomas fell silent for a few minutes, simply observing the priest with his analytical gaze. "Tell me more about this boy, this teacher." For the next 30 minutes, Father Michael recounted Ethan's entire story. He spoke of his muteness, his determination to learn sign language, his dedication to teaching the other children, the makeshift shack, and the dreams of the 5 children. "Father, did you know I was once a poor boy who had to overcome hardships to study?" Archbishop Thomas said when Father Michael finished. The question took the priest by surprise. "I didn't know, Archbishop Thomas. My father was a farmhand in rural West Virginia. I learned to read from a seminarian who visited our area once a month. If not for that opportunity, I likely never would have gotten where I am today." Father Michael saw an opening. "So you understand the importance of giving these children opportunities?" "I do, Father. But I also understand the importance of doing things the right way. We can't act on emotional impulse." Archbishop Thomas stood and walked to the window overlooking the town square. "Father Michael, I'll give you 2 choices. First, you step away from this project completely and never involve yourself without prior authorization again. Second, we turn this into an official diocesan project with all necessary protocols, and you take charge of coordinating it." The priest's heart raced. "Archbishop Thomas, I choose the second option." "Then prepare yourself, Father. We'll have much work ahead. We'll need permits, insurance, qualified professionals, proper space, and strict accountability." "I'm ready for any challenge, Archbishop Thomas." "Good. But there's one condition. I want to meet this boy, Ethan, personally before approving anything." On Saturday morning, Father Michael took Archbishop Thomas to see the shack. The bishop, despite his 70 years, insisted on walking down the dirt road without complaining about the dust or the strong sun. When they reached the shack, they found Ethan teaching the 4 children. It was a Saturday. There was no obligation to be there, but he had scheduled a special class to teach the children how to write letters to their parents. Archbishop Thomas observed the class quietly for nearly an hour. He watched Ethan patiently explain how to form each letter, how to put words together to express feelings, and how to use writing to show love and gratitude. When the class ended, Archbishop Thomas approached Ethan. The boy clearly grew nervous when he realized this was an important church authority. "Ethan, my name is Thomas. I'm the bishop of the diocese. I came to see your work." Ethan looked at Father Michael, who nodded encouragingly. The boy then picked up his notebook and wrote, "Archbishop Thomas, did I do something wrong?" The bishop read the question and smiled. "No, Ethan, quite the opposite. You're doing something very right. You're fulfilling one of the most important Christian missions, teaching those who don't know." Ethan wrote another question. "Will you let us keep studying?" "Not only will I let you, but I'll help you get a real school, with desks, a new blackboard, books, and everything you need." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He quickly gestured to the other children, who began smiling and clapping. "Father Michael," said Archbishop Thomas, "on Monday, I want a meeting with everyone involved in this project. Let's get to work." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On Monday, St. Patrick's Church held a special meeting. Present were Archbishop Thomas, Father Michael, Sister Margaret, Dr. Richard, Mrs. Sharon from the public school, and all the parents of the children involved in the project. Archbishop Thomas opened the meeting by explaining that the diocese had decided to create the Ethan Project, a pilot program for inclusive education and educational support for children in vulnerable situations. "The goal is simple," explained the bishop. "We want every child in this community to have access to quality education, regardless of their limitations or their family's financial situation." Dr. Richard presented the training plan for Ethan. He would receive formal instruction in pedagogy, advanced sign language, child psychology, and adapted teaching techniques. At the same time, he would continue working with the children, but now with professional supervision. Mrs. Sharon explained how integration with the municipal school system would work. The children would be officially enrolled, but would have a personalized program that respected their learning pace and specific needs. "And where will this school be?" asked Mr. Terence, Johnny's father. "Sister Margaret will explain that part," said Archbishop Thomas. The parish administrator stood up with a folder of documents. "The diocese has approved the construction of an educational annex next to the church. It will be a 2-story building with 4 classrooms, a library, a computer lab, and space for recreational activities." The room fell completely silent. No one had expected such a large investment. "Archbishop Thomas," said Mrs. Jennifer, Ethan's mother, "this must cost a lot of money. How will the church pay for it?" "Mrs. Jennifer, education is an investment, not an expense. Besides diocesan funds, we've already secured partnerships with local businesses and a special grant from a corporate social responsibility program in New York." "But why are you doing all this?" asked Mrs. Linda, little Amy's mother. Archbishop Thomas looked at Ethan, who was paying close attention to everything through the sign language interpretation provided by Father Michael. "Because this boy has taught us something fundamental. Education isn't just about nice schools and trained teachers. It's about passion for teaching and the desire to learn. Ethan has that in abundance, and it's our duty to give him and the other children all the necessary tools." The meeting ended with a defined schedule. Construction would begin in 2 weeks and was expected to be completed in 4 months. Meanwhile, classes would continue, now held in a room provided by the church itself. Ethan would be officially hired as a junior educational assistant, with a salary and benefits. The other children would receive uniforms, school supplies, and free daily meals. But not everything would be easy. In the following weeks, Father Michael discovered that change always brings resistance. Some members of the community began questioning whether it was fair to give so much support to just 5 children when there were other needs in the area. Others thought Ethan was too young for such responsibility. The hardest part was dealing with Ethan's own self-doubt. With so much attention and expectation on him, the boy began to feel anxious. In a conversation with Father Michael, he wrote in his notebook, "What if I can't be a real teacher? What if I disappoint everyone?" "Ethan," said the priest, "you already are a real teacher. The only difference is that now you'll have more knowledge and better resources to do what you already do." But the crisis came unexpectedly. During the 5th week of classes at the church, one of the children, little Tyler, had an asthma attack during physical activity. Though he was quickly helped and taken to the health center where he fully recovered, the incident sparked unkind gossip in the community. "I warned that giving too much responsibility to a 12-year-old boy would cause problems," commented Mrs. Gladys, a longtime resident of the neighborhood. The rumor reached Sister Margaret, who grew concerned about potential legal implications. She approached Father Michael to express her worries. "Father, maybe we should reconsider Ethan's role. He could stay as an assistant, but perhaps an adult should be the main person in charge." "Sister, Tyler has had asthma since he was little. The attack had nothing to do with the activities. It could have happened anywhere." "I know, Father, but people are talking. What if this reaches Archbishop Thomas's ears?" Father Michael realized he needed to act quickly, to protect the project and, most importantly, to keep Ethan from feeling guilty for something that wasn't his fault. That afternoon, he gathered all the children and their parents for an open conversation. I want everyone to know that what happened to Tyler was no one's fault. Asthma attacks are unpredictable and can happen at any time. Father, said Mrs. Deborah, Tyler's mother, I want to make it clear that I don't blame Ethan or the school. My son loves the classes and is learning so much. His asthma has flared up before at home. Ethan, visibly shaken since the incident, wrote a question in his notebook. Should I stop teaching? Ethan, said Mr. Terrence, my Johnny came home yesterday saying he wants to be a teacher like you when he grows up. Do you think you should stop inspiring other children because of an asthma attack that had nothing to do with you? Mr. Terrence's words were echoed by all the other parents. It was clear the families not only supported Ethan, but saw him as a role model for their children. But the situation grew more complicated when Mrs. Gladys decided to formalize her complaint. She went to the city's Child Welfare Council to report that a child was being burdened with adult responsibilities. The complaint triggered an official investigation. A social worker was assigned to evaluate whether Ethan was being exploited or placed in a risky situation. Dr. Patricia, the social worker handling the case, arrived at the church on a Tuesday morning to conduct her assessment. She was a serious woman in her 50s, known for strictly enforcing child protection protocols. Father Michael, I need to understand exactly what role this child plays in the educational program. Father Michael explained in detail how the program worked, emphasizing that Ethan received constant supervision and that his participation was voluntary and enjoyable. But he receives payment, correct? Asked Dr. Patricia. Yes, a scholarship and a small stipend for his work as a tutor. Father, a 12-year-old child cannot be officially employed. That constitutes child labor. The priest's heart froze. He hadn't considered the legal implications. Doctor, how can we resolve this? First, I need to speak with the child and assess whether he's being harmed in any way. Then, we'll see if adjustments can be made to bring the program into compliance. Dr. Patricia's interview with Ethan was tense. The boy, nervous in the presence of an authority figure who could shut down his project, hesitated before answering the written questions. Ethan, do you feel forced to teach these children? The social worker asked. Ethan wrote, No, I really enjoy teaching. Do you have time to play and just be a kid? Yes, I play with my students during recess. Are your school grades good? Ethan hesitated. He wasn't enrolled in a regular school, only in the special program. Father Michael stepped in to explain Ethan's unique educational situation, but realized this might complicate things further. Dr. Patricia, the priest said, Ethan is receiving proper education through the special program we've set up. He has psychoeducational support and is thriving. Father, regardless of the quality of education, a 12-year-old has the right to attend school, not to work. Teaching other children, even if it's his calling, is an adult responsibility. The situation seemed hopeless. Dr. Patricia made it clear that unless significant changes were made, she would have to recommend suspending Ethan's participation. That night, Father Michael called Archbishop Thomas to report the situation. The bishop listened quietly and then said, Father, I'll consult our lawyers to find a legal solution. But in the meantime, temporarily stop Ethan's stipend. He can continue participating, but only as a student assistant, not as an employee. The news devastated Ethan. When Father Michael explained he could no longer receive the scholarship, the boy wrote, So I'm not good enough to be a real teacher. Ethan, this has nothing to do with your ability. These are legal issues the adults must resolve. You're still an exceptional teacher, but the blow was hard on the boy. For the first time since the program began, Ethan missed a class. Mrs. Jennifer called to say he was depressed and wouldn't leave his bed. The other children immediately felt his absence. During the lesson with the substitute teacher Archbishop Thomas had temporarily hired, they were distracted and disheartened. Where's Teacher Ethan? Little Amy asked. He's feeling a bit sad today, Father Michael explained, but he'll be back soon. Is it because that lady said he can't teach anymore? Johnny asked, showing the children understood more than the adults realized. Father Michael knew he needed a creative solution. I couldn't let bureaucratic issues destroy the dreams of 6 children. That afternoon he sought out Dr. Richard to discuss alternatives. Doctor, is there any legal way to keep Ethan actively involved in the project? Father, I have an idea. What if we officially recognized Ethan as a special student in a teaching initiation program? That way he wouldn't be an employee, but rather a student learning how to teach. How would that work? Ethan would be officially enrolled in a special high school program with an emphasis on education. Part of his schedule would involve observing and assisting in the other children's classes. It would be learning, not work. The idea seemed perfect. Archbishop Thomas approved it immediately, and the diocese lawyers confirmed it was within legal bounds. When Father Michael presented the proposal to Dr. Patricia, she was impressed by the creativity of the solution. Father, if Ethan is officially enrolled in an educational program and his participation is considered a learning internship, there's no legal issue. And can he continue actively helping in the classes? Yes, as long as he has proper educational supervision, and it's clear that it's part of his own learning process. The next day, Father Michael went to Ethan's house to share the good news. The boy was in the backyard, sitting under a mango tree, flipping through a math book. Ethan, I have news about the project. The boy looked at the priest with a mix of hope and apprehension. Father Michael explained the whole new structure of the program. Ethan would officially be a student, training to be a teacher, receiving formal education while also learning hands-on by helping the other children. You're still essential to the project, Ethan. The only difference is that now you'll learn even more while teaching. Ethan wrote in his notebook. What about the other kids? Can they keep studying? Of course, in fact, we have a surprise. 3 more children from the community asked to join the project. Ethan's smile was the most beautiful response Father Michael could have received. The implementation of the new structure brought unexpected positive changes. With Ethan officially a student in training, it became possible to bring in other specialized teachers to enhance the program. Mrs. Susan, a retired 65-year-old educator, volunteered to supervise Ethan's activities and teach advanced math. She had worked in public schools for 40 years and was charmed by the boy's dedication. Ethan has a natural talent for teaching, she remarked to Father Michael after a week of observation. He instinctively adapts his language and methods to each child's level. It's rare to see that even in experienced teachers. Mr. Daniel, a sign language specialist, began visiting the school twice a week to improve Ethan's skills and teach the basics to the other children and teachers. Father, Mr. Daniel said, Ethan already masters a level of sign language we usually only see in people who've studied for years. He has an incredible intuition for nonverbal communication. The project was growing in an organized and sustainable way, but Father Michael knew one fundamental issue remained unresolved: Ethan's long-term educational future. Archbishop Thomas had mentioned the possibility of a university scholarship for Ethan when the time came, but that was still far off. The priority now was ensuring he completed high school properly. Then an unexpected proposal arrived. Dr. Robert, the regional dean of Georgetown University, had heard about the project through Archbishop Thomas and came for a visit to see the work firsthand. Father Michael, our university has an inclusive education program that could greatly benefit from your experience. We're considering creating a pilot project to prepare young educational mentors. How would it work, Dr. Robert? Ethan would be our first special student. On weekends, he'd attend workshops at the university on pedagogy, educational psychology, and technology applied to teaching. During the week, he'd continue applying what he learned here. The proposal was tempting, but Father Michael worried it might overwhelm Ethan. Ethan is only 12. Wouldn't it be too much responsibility? Father, I've spoken with our educational psychologists. Gifted children in teaching need stimulation that matches their intellectual development. If we don't offer these challenges, Ethan might feel frustrated and lose interest. When the proposal was presented to Ethan, his reaction was pure excitement. He wrote a whole letter to Father Michael, expressing his joy at the opportunity to learn more about teaching. Father, I've always dreamed of being a real teacher. If the university can teach me how to be better, I really want to participate. Ethan's first visit to the university was thrilling. Accompanied by Father Michael and Mrs. Jennifer, he explored the classrooms, the library, and the computer labs. Mom, look at all these books! Ethan gestured to Mrs. Jennifer, who had learned basic sign language to communicate better with her son. Professor Charles, the program coordinator, was impressed by Ethan's observational skills. "Ethan, I'll show you some different teaching techniques. I want you to observe and then tell me which you think would work best with your students." For 2 hours, Ethan watched demonstrations of various teaching methods. Afterward, he wrote his observations in a notebook, which Professor Charles read with growing admiration. "Father, this boy has a more mature pedagogical insight than many of my undergraduate students. He intuitively identifies which method would be most effective for each student's profile." The university program brought remarkable growth in Ethan's work. He began incorporating educational games, storytelling techniques, and even theatrical elements into his lessons. The other children were fascinated by the new ideas Ethan introduced each week. Little Amy, who once struggled with math, started loving numbers after Ethan created a play where numbers were characters with distinct personalities. "Teacher Ethan," Amy said during a lesson, "the number 7 really is as stubborn as you said. It doesn't want to join the other numbers in the equation." Ethan's ability to turn abstract concepts into concrete stories amazed all the adults involved in the project, but not everything was smooth sailing. As the project grew and gained attention, external pressures began to emerge. A city councilman seeking political visibility started making speeches about the project at City Hall, taking credit for its success and proposing to expand the model to other regions. "Father," Councilman Mark said during an unannounced visit, "this project has the potential to be replicated across the city. We could secure federal funding to expand it." "Councilman, I appreciate your interest, but our focus now is to strengthen what we have and ensure quality before thinking about expansion." "Father, you don't understand. This could become public policy. Ethan could become a national symbol of overcoming adversity." The idea of turning Ethan into a political symbol deeply troubled Father Michael. The boy was already dealing with enough pressure and expectations. "Councilman, Ethan is a child who needs protection and gradual development. It can't be exposed as political propaganda. Father, with all due respect, but you're wasting a historic opportunity. How many children like Ethan are there across the United States who could be helped?" The political pressure intensified when journalists from New York learned about the story and came to do a special report. The piece, though positive, brought national attention to the project. Ethan was visibly uncomfortable with the cameras and interviews. During the recording, his hands trembled as he tried to communicate through signs. "Father," he wrote after the journalists left, "I don't like being filmed. I'd rather just teach my kids." Father Michael realized he needed to protect Ethan from overexposure. He spoke with Archbishop Thomas about setting clear boundaries for visits and interviews. "Archbishop Thomas, Ethan is starting to get anxious with all this attention. We need to preserve the educational essence of the project." "I agree, Father. I'll instruct our communications team to better filter media requests. The children's well-being comes first." The decision was the right one. In the following weeks, with less external pressure, Ethan became relaxed again and focused on what he truly loved doing, teaching. During this time, something happened that would permanently change the course of the story. One Thursday morning, during English class, Ethan was helping Johnny with a reading exercise when suddenly he murmured, "Well done, Johnny. You got it." The room fell completely silent. Everyone looked at Ethan, who seemed just as surprised as the others by the sound that had come from his mouth. Teacher Susan, who was supervising the class, calmly approached. "Ethan, can you repeat what you just said?" The boy hesitated, touched his own throat with his hands, and whispered, I spoke." Tears began streaming down the faces of all the children. Johnny stood up and hugged Ethan, shouting, "He talked! Teacher Ethan talked!" The news spread quickly. Mrs. Jennifer came running from the house where she worked as a cleaner. Father Michael cancelled all his appointments for the day. Archbishop Thomas came in person to see what had happened. "Ethan," Father Michael said, his voice choked up, "how do you feel?" "Father." Ethan's voice came out hoarse but clear. "It's strange. The words were always here." He touched his chest. "But now they can come out. Dr. Richard was called to evaluate the phenomenon." After a long conversation with Ethan, he explained what had happened. Ethan's mutism was always psychological, not physical. The trauma of losing his father made him lock away his speech as a defense mechanism. The safe and stimulating environment he found here, combined with the life purpose he discovered in teaching, created the conditions for him to naturally overcome this barrier. "Doctor, does this mean he'll keep speaking?" asked Mrs. Jennifer. "It means Ethan now has a choice. He can use speech when he feels comfortable and sign language when he prefers. Both forms of communication are equally valid and important." Ethan confirmed that he'd rather keep using sign language primarily with his kids, as it had become the hallmark of his teaching. But now he could also speak with adults when needed. "Father," Ethan said, practicing his voice, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Ethan." "Why did you believe in me from the start? Why didn't you just see me as a troubled kid?" Father Michael smiled and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ethan, when I saw you teaching other children in that shack, I recognized something special. I saw a gift, a true calling. My role was just to provide the conditions for that gift to flourish. And now, what's going to happen to me? Now, Ethan, you'll keep growing, learning, and teaching. You'll graduate from high school, probably go to college, and one day become a certified teacher. But you'll always be remembered as the boy who proved that education comes from the heart." The following months brought a special stability to the project. Ethan, now able to choose between speaking and using signs, felt more confident. The children continued to make impressive progress. Little Amy, who had arrived not even knowing how to write her own name, was now reading short adventure books. Johnny discovered a passion for math and dreamed of becoming an engineer. Tyler overcame his shyness and became a great helper to Ethan. Emily showed a talent for drawing and began illustrating the stories she wrote. The original group of 5 children had grown to 12, including some children with special needs who were referred by the Child Welfare Council. "Father," Ethan said during a conversation at the end of a school day, "I think I've found my purpose in life." "What is it, Ethan?" "I want to show that every child can learn, no matter their limitations. I want to be the bridge between special children and the education they deserve." Ethan's maturity and clarity of purpose impressed everyone. At 13, he already knew exactly what kind of professional he wanted to become. When it came time to evaluate the results of the project's first year, the numbers were astonishing. All the children who had started without knowing how to read were now literate. Those who already knew a little had advanced at least 2 years in their level of knowledge. More important than the numbers were the personal transformations. Parents reported that their children came home excited to share what they had learned. The children had developed self-confidence, a sense of responsibility, and above all, a love for learning. "Teacher Ethan," little Amy said one afternoon, "when I grow up, can I be a teacher like you?" "Of course you can, Amy, and I'll help you study for it, even if I stay small." Ethan laughed and gestured that he didn't understand the question. "Amy means," Johnny explained, "that she's afraid she'll still be short when she grows up." Ethan knelt to Amy's height and said, "Amy, being tall or short doesn't matter when it comes to being a teacher. What matters is having a big heart to teach and a smart mind to learn. And you have both." These moments of simplicity and wisdom were the ones that moved Father Michael the most. Seeing Ethan, still a teenager, guiding other children with such sensitivity, showed that the investment in the project went far beyond formal education. Recognition came naturally. The project received awards from educational organizations. Ethan was invited to speak at teaching conferences, always accompanied by responsible adults, and the methodology they developed began to be studied at universities. But what mattered most to Ethan was the affection of the children and the pride he saw in their parents' eyes. "Ethan," Terence said at a parents' meeting, "my Johnny came home today and said he wants to study to become a doctor. That's thanks to you, son. You planted dreams in his heart." During the project's second year, an unexpected situation tested the foundation they had built once again. Deborah, Tyler's mother, lost her job, and the family had to move to another city. "Teacher Ethan," Tyler said with tears in his eyes, "I don't want to leave. I want to keep studying here with you." The situation was delicate. The family couldn't afford to stay, and Tyler couldn't be separated from his parents. That's when Mr. Daniel, the sign language specialist, had an idea. "Ethan, what if we create a distance learning program for former students who've moved away? We can use video calls to keep Tyler connected with the class." The suggestion opened a new dimension for the project. With support from the university, they created a system where former students who had moved away could continue participating in some activities online. Tyler became the project's first distance learner. Twice a week, he joined the lessons via video call. Ethan adapted some exercises so Tyler could do them at home and share them with the class. "Look at this," Tyler said during one call. "Here at my new school, I'm helping a girl who didn't know how to read. I'm teaching her the same way you all taught me." The idea was multiplying. Tyler had become a little ambassador for the methodology in his new town. This development made Archbishop Thomas reflect on the real possibility of expanding the project. "Father Michael," he said during a meeting, "perhaps it's time we think about how to share this experience with other communities, but in an organic and responsible way." "How so, Archbishop Thomas?" "We could create a training program for young mentors based on Ethan's model. Not to turn it into public policy overnight, but to prepare other young people with similar qualities." The idea made sense. Ethan was thriving and could share his experience with other teens interested in education. "But it has to be voluntary and gradual," Father Michael cautioned. "We can't pressure Ethan to become a multiplier if he doesn't want to." When the proposal was presented to Ethan, his response was enthusiastic. "Father, it would be amazing to meet other kids who love teaching. We could learn from each other." And so the Young Educators Program was born. It started small, with just 3 teens from neighboring communities who came once a month to learn from Ethan and the project team. Each young person adapted the methods to their own community's reality. Some worked with street kids, others with farmers' children, and others with kids in shelters. "Ethan," said Carla, a 15-year-old girl who worked with indigenous children, "how do you teach math without using big words?" "I use everyday objects," Ethan replied. "Pebbles for counting, sticks to show different sizes, leaves to form groups. Kids understand better when they touch and see things." These exchanges enriched everyone's work. Ethan learned as much as he taught, and his ability to adapt only grew. By the end of the second year, it was time for a deeper evaluation of the project. A team of researchers from the University of Chicago came to study the methods developed and their results. "Ethan," said Dr. Sandra, the research team leader, "we'd like to document your methodology so other educators can learn from your experience. Would you agree?" "Yes, but on one condition," Ethan replied. "Ethan, what's that?" "That it's clear I'm not the only one. Everyone helped. Father Michael, Mrs. Susan, Dr. Richard, the kids' families. I was just a small part of it." Ethan's humility impressed the researchers. Even with all the recognition he was receiving, he never lost sight of the fact that education is a collective effort. The study resulted in a scientific paper published in international academic journals. At 14, Ethan became the co-author of an academic study, something extremely rare for someone his age. But what made him proudest wasn't the awards or recognition. It was seeing his first students grow and follow their own paths. Johnny had earned a scholarship to a technical school to study engineering. Amy was entering art contests and winning prizes. Emily had discovered a passion for biology and wanted to be a veterinarian. Tyler, even from a distance, continued to excel at his new school. "Mr. Ethan," said Johnny during a visit to the school, "I got the scholarship. I'm going to study real engineering." Ethan hugged his first student with tears in his eyes. "Johnny, you always knew you were capable. I just helped you believe in yourself." "Mr. Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Don't you feel sad seeing us leave?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Johnny, a teacher's job is to prepare students so they don't need him anymore. I'm happy when you grow and follow your dreams. It means I did my job right." This conversation marked a new phase in Ethan's life. He was maturing and understanding that his role was that of a catalyst. He helped people discover and develop their potential, then watched them go their own way. At 15, Ethan was in his sophomore year of high school with excellent grades. He had full scholarship offers from 3 different universities for after graduation, but his priority remained his work at the community school. "Ethan," said Archbishop Thomas during a conversation, "you need to start thinking about your academic future. What do you want to study in college?" "Archbishop Thomas, I want to study education, but a special kind, focused on children with different needs." "That's a choice that fits your path, and after college, I want to come back here and keep working with our school, but I also want to research teaching methods for special needs children." Ethan's plan was clear. He wanted to become as professional as possible, to do even better work in the community that gave him his first opportunity. But before college, Ethan would face his biggest challenge yet. In the project's 3rd year, a child arrived who would test all his knowledge and patience. Michael was an 8-year-old boy with severe autism. His parents, after trying several schools without success, heard about the project through child services and came seeking help. "Mr. Ethan," said Mrs. Susan, Michael's mother, "my son has never been able to adjust to any school. The teachers say he's too difficult, but I know he's smart." Ethan watched Michael, who sat in the corner of the room, rocking slightly and avoiding eye contact. "Mrs. Susan, I'll be honest with you. I've never worked with a child with autism this severe, but I can try, if you're patient." "Mr. Ethan, just the fact that you're willing to try means so much." Working with Michael required Ethan to research and learn entirely new techniques. He spent weeks studying autism, talking to specialists, and adapting his methods. The first week was frustrating. Michael didn't respond to any traditional approaches. He made no eye contact, didn't follow simple instructions, and became agitated with too much stimulation. "Mrs. Patricia," Ethan said after a tough week, "I don't think I'm helping Michael." "Ethan, working with autism takes time and patience. You can't give up after 1 week." "But he won't even look at me. How can I teach someone who can't see me?" "Maybe the problem is you trying to make Michael adapt to your methods. Why not try adapting to his world?" Mrs. Patricia's advice was the turning point. Ethan stopped trying to make Michael join group activities and began observing what truly interested the boy. Michael liked different textures, was fascinated by geometric patterns, and calmed down when listening to classical music. Ethan started using these elements as gateways to learning. He created tactile games to teach numbers, used colorful geometric shapes to introduce math concepts, and discovered that Michael responded better when activities followed a very predictable routine. After a month of attempts, Michael made his first eye contact with Ethan. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was a significant breakthrough. "Mom," Ethan said to Mrs. Sarah, "Michael is making progress. It's slow, but it's happening. How can I help at home?" "Keep the routine he's used to here. Michael needs predictability to feel safe." Working with Michael transformed Ethan as an educator. He learned that every child has their own pace and way of learning, and that the teacher's role is to discover and respect those differences. After 6 months, Michael could stay in the same room as other children without getting agitated. He began imitating simple gestures and showed joy when recognizing patterns in the games Ethan created. "Mr. Ethan," said Amy, now 10 years old and one of the oldest assistants, "can I help with Michael?" "How do you want to help?" "I can read stories to him. I saw he likes it when you read in a calm voice." Amy's suggestion was brilliant. Michael responded well to the soft voices of the girls in the group. Gradually, he grew accustomed to the presence of other children. Michael's case became a milestone in the project. It showed that with patience, creativity, and a lot of love, even children facing the greatest challenges could be included. "Ethan," said Dr. Richard, "the work you're doing with Michael could be a model for other schools. Few trained professionals achieve the results you're getting." "Doctor, I think it's because I don't know it's impossible, so I keep trying until it works." Ethan's simplicity and determination continued to impress the adults around him. By the time Ethan turned 16, the project was serving 25 children, had 6 young trainees, and had become a national reference for community-based inclusive education. But what made Ethan proudest was the progress of his first students. Johnny was doing well in vocational school, and already talked about studying engineering in college. Amy had won a scholarship to an art school and dreamed of becoming a children's book illustrator. Tyler continued to excel in his new town and even talked about becoming a teacher himself. "Mr. Ethan," Tyler said during a video call, "I want to come back for the holidays and help you with the new kids." "That would be great, Tyler. You can teach them what you've learned at your new school." The idea of former students returning as volunteers created a virtuous cycle. Children who had started as students came back as mentors, building a lasting support network. It was around this time that Ethan made an important decision about his immediate future. He had received invitations to speak in other states and even abroad, but chose to focus on finishing high school and training the next generation of assistants. "Father," Ethan said, "I'd rather plant seeds here and watch them grow than travel around talking about what I've planted." Ethan's maturity and wisdom at 16 impressed everyone who knew him. He had found the perfect balance between personal ambition and social commitment. The project continued to grow sustainably. Other churches in the area began implementing similar programs, always with the support and guidance of Ethan's team. "Ethan," Archbishop Thomas said during an evaluation meeting, "you've created something that will last long after you're gone. That's the true legacy of an educator." "Archbishop Thomas, what I want most is for the day to come when they don't need me anymore. When the children of this community grow up and become teachers for their own children." This long-term vision showed how Ethan had evolved from a boy who simply wanted to teach a few children into a young man who thought about sustainable social transformation. During his last year of high school, Ethan was accepted with full scholarships to 3 prestigious universities. He chose the state university that was closest to home, so he could continue working on the project during weekends. "Mom," Ethan said to Mrs. Jennifer, "I want to study education at the university, but I'll never abandon our school." "Son, you have to live your life too. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." "Mom, teaching isn't a burden for me. It's what makes me happy. The university will give me more tools to do better what I already do." The conversation showed how Ethan had completely integrated his personal calling with his sense of social responsibility. When the time came to say goodbye to the children before starting university, though he would still come on weekends, emotion filled the school. "Teacher Ethan," said little Sophia, a 6-year-old girl who had recently joined the project, "are you going to forget about us?" Ethan knelt to her level and said, "Sophia, a teacher never forgets their students. You're all part of my heart forever, and I'll keep coming here every weekend to watch you grow. And when you become a university professor, will you still come here? Sophia, no matter how far I go in life, I'll always come back to this school. This is where I learned to be who I am." Ethan's high school graduation ceremony was held in the church itself, attended by all the children, parents, teachers, and even some local officials. Archbishop Thomas gave a moving speech about how a boy who had arrived at the church in silence had become a powerful voice for inclusive education. "Ethan," the bishop said in his address, "you've taught us that age doesn't determine wisdom, that limitations can become strengths, and that true education is born from love, not diplomas." When Ethan stepped up to the altar to receive his certificate, the children stood up spontaneously and began applauding in sign language. The silent, synchronized movement of their hands created one of the most beautiful moments of the ceremony. "Thank you," Ethan said, signing in response to the children's applause. "Thank you for teaching me that teaching is learning, that listening is more important than speaking, and that love is the foundation of all true education." His first week at the university was challenging. For the first time in years, Ethan was in an environment where he wasn't special or different. He was just another education student. "Professor," Ethan said to the program coordinator, "can I do my first presentation on community-based inclusive education?" "Of course, Ethan. But remember, here you'll learn theories that will challenge and refine your empirical methods." Ethan saw this as an opportunity. He wanted to understand the scientific basis behind the methods he had developed intuitively. On weekends, when he returned to the community school, Ethan applied what he was learning at the university. He brought new educational games, more precise assessment techniques, and methods for psychoeducational support. "Teacher Susan," Ethan said after a semester at the university. "I'm realizing we did a lot of things right instinctively, but I'm also learning ways to do even better." Ethan, the hands-on experience you had was your best preparation for university. Now you're combining intuition with scientific knowledge. During his second semester, Ethan developed his first official academic research, a study on the outcomes of community-based inclusive education based on his own experience. The work impressed his university professors and was selected for presentation at a national pedagogy conference. "Ethan," said Professor Michael, his advisor at the university, "we rarely see an undergraduate project with such rich data and mature analysis. Are you sure you want to pursue an academic career?" "Professor, I want to graduate as well as possible so I can return to my community and do even better work. Academia is a means, not an end for me." Ethan's clarity of purpose continued to impress everyone around him. During the summer break, he organized an intensive course for young people interested in becoming community education mentors. Participants came from 7 different states. "Ethan," said Brooke, a young woman from Florida, "how did you discover your calling so early?" "Brooke, I think the calling found me. I just needed an opportunity for it to show itself." "But did you ever doubt yourself?" "Many times. But whenever I doubted, I looked at the children learning and the doubt faded. They gave me certainty that I was on the right path." The course was a success. Several participants returned to their cities and started similar projects adapted to their local realities. When Ethan began his second year of university, he already knew the topic of his senior thesis: Development of Inclusive Methodologies for Community Education, a Longitudinal Study. "Professor Michael," Ethan said, "I want to scientifically document the entire process we've lived over the past 5 years, not just the methods, but also the social and emotional impacts on the children and families." "Ethan, this is an ambitious thesis. You'll need rigorous data collection, structured interviews, statistical analysis." "I'm prepared, Professor. I have all the records from the start of the project, and I can track the children's progress for 2 more years until I graduate." Ethan's thesis became one of the most closely followed research projects at the university. Professors from other departments came to watch his progress presentations. Alongside his university studies, Ethan continued developing the community project. Now 18, and with a solid theoretical foundation, he was able to implement significant improvements. He created a continuous evaluation system to track each child's progress individually. He developed a psychological support program for families. He partnered with the public healthcare system to serve children with special needs. "Ethan," said Dr. Richard, "you've turned an educational project into a comprehensive social development program. This should be public policy." "Doctor, maybe one day it will be, but first I need to prove it works here, document everything scientifically, and train others to replicate it." The scientific methodology Ethan was learning at the university was being applied to make the project stronger and more replicable. During his 3rd year, an unexpected opportunity arose. The Department of Education was developing a national inclusive education program and offered Ethan a consulting position. "Ethan," said the program director, "we want your help adapting your methodology for nationwide implementation." "Director, I'm honored by the invitation, but I have some conditions." "What are they?" "First, any adaptation must respect local specifics. It can't be a one-size-fits-all model imposed from above. Second, communities must be involved from the planning stage. Third, it can't be implemented without proper training for educators." Ethan's conditions showed his maturity and understanding that good ideas can be ruined by poorly planned implementation. "Ethan, your qualifications are exactly what we were looking for. We want someone who understands that education can't be standardized." Ethan accepted the consulting job, but made it clear he would continue prioritizing his studies and the community project. Over the following months, Ethan traveled across the country, encountering diverse educational realities. He saw fantastic projects thriving with few resources, and well-funded programs failing due to a lack of connection with the community. "Father," Ethan said during one of his weekly calls, "I'm learning that our project works, because it was born from the real needs of the people. Many programs fail because they're created in offices without listening to those who actually need them. Ethan, that's a valuable lesson. Take that into the work you're doing with the Department of Education. The travels across the country greatly enriched Ethan's perspective on education. He always returned with new ideas to implement in the local project. During a visit to a riverside community in Alaska, Ethan met an indigenous teacher who had developed methods similar to his for teaching children from different tribes. "Teacher Autumn," Ethan said, "how did you manage to create teaching methods for children who speak different languages?" "Son, children are children anywhere. Children. They all want to learn, play, and feel important. The secret is finding the language they all understand." "What language is that?" "Love, patience, and respect. When you show that, children trust you. And where there's trust, there's learning." The conversation with Teacher Autumn reinforced Ethan's belief that the fundamental principles of education are universal, but methods must be adapted to local realities. When he returned home, Ethan arranged a video call between Teacher Autumn and his team. The exchange of experiences was enriching for everyone. "Professor Ethan," said Amy, now 14 and one of the project's senior mentors, "Teacher Autumn reminded me of you when you first started. She teaches with her heart just like you did." "Amy, that's what matters most. Techniques can be learned, methods can be refined, but without genuine love for the children, nothing truly works." During his final year at university, Ethan dedicated himself intensely to completing his thesis. The data collected over 7 years was impressive. Of the 42 children who had gone through the project, 38 had successfully integrated into mainstream education. 3 had moved on to specialized programs due to specific needs. Only 1 family had relocated before completing the follow-up. More important than the numbers were the interviews with families, which showed profound transformations. Parents reported increased self-esteem in their children, improved behavior at home, and most importantly, a growing love for learning. "Ethan," Professor Michael said, "your thesis is at a master's level. You should consider graduate school right after graduation." "Professor, I will pursue a master's, but I want a year's break to solidify the project and maybe open a second location." "Where would that be?" "I'm thinking about a neighborhood on the other side of town. We already have 3 trained young mentors who could coordinate it with our supervision." Ethan's vision for expansion was always careful and sustainable. He preferred to grow slowly but with quality. Ethan's thesis defense was a special event. The panel included university professors, as well as Archbishop Thomas, Dr. Richard Bennett, and representatives from the families served. "Mr. Ethan," said the panel's chairwoman, "in 20 years of my career, I've rarely seen such a comprehensive and impactful undergraduate thesis. Your conclusions could influence public education policies." "Professor, my goal isn't to influence top-down policies, but to show that effective solutions can emerge from communities themselves when given proper support." Ethan graduated with highest honors, but what moved him most was seeing his first students in the audience. Johnny, now studying engineering, Amy pursuing visual arts, Tyler, who had returned to finish high school in the area, Emily, majoring in biology. "Professor Ethan," Johnny said after the defense, "you taught us to read and write, but most of all, you taught us to dream." At the graduation celebration organized by the community, Ethan gave a speech that summed up his journey and his hopes for the future. "Friends, 9 years ago, I was a boy who didn't speak and thought I'd never truly communicate. You taught me that communication isn't just about words. It's about connection, understanding, and love. Today, I graduate with a degree in education, but I know my learning as a teacher has only just begun. Every child I meet teaches me something new about teaching. Every family that trusts our work teaches me something new about responsibility. My dream now is to help build a network of community projects across the United States, not to standardize methods, but to connect people who believe quality education is every child's right, no matter where they're born or what challenges they face. But my deepest commitment remains to this community that gave me my first chance. This is where I'll keep learning, growing, and I hope making a difference in more children's lives." The speech was met with absolute silence, followed by a wave of applause in sign language that lasted several minutes, a signature gesture of appreciation Ethan had created. In the years that followed, Ethan kept his promise. He opened a second location for the project, began a master's in special education, and started developing teaching materials for other community educators. His thesis focused on training methods for young teaching assistants, organizing all the knowledge he'd gained through years of hands-on experience. By 25, Ethan had become a national leader in community-based inclusive education, but he still lived in the same house with Mrs. Jennifer, worked in the same classrooms where he'd started, and gave the same loving care to every child who joined the program. "Son," Mrs. Jennifer said one day, "don't you want to start your own family? Build an independent life? Mom, I already have a big family. It's every child who walks through these doors. And my independent life is exactly this, choosing to stay where I'm happy and useful." By 30, as Ethan marked 15 years in education, the project had grown into a network of 20 locations across 10 states. Over 1,000 children had been directly supported, and hundreds of young teaching assistants had been trained. But for Ethan, the most important number was another: 0. That was how many children in the original community lacked access to quality education. "Father," Ethan said to the now elderly Father Michael, "do you remember following me to that shack that Sunday morning? How could I forget? It was the day that changed my life as much as yours. Father, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been curious. How many children wouldn't have had the chance to learn?" "Ethan, I only opened a door. You're the one who built the whole school on the other side." The conversation took place in the new library of the community school, a bright, spacious room that had replaced the old, rickety shack. On the main wall, a photo showed 12-year-old Ethan teaching his first 4 students on the dirt floor. Beneath the photo, a sign read, "Where there's a child eager to learn and a heart willing to teach, there's a school." Today, at 35 years old, teacher Ethan Anderson, as he's known nationally, continues to coordinate the network of community schools that began with a chance encounter between a curious priest and a mute boy with a big dream. He never married in the traditional sense, but always says he's married to education. He never had biological children, but raised hundreds of children of the heart, who are now doctors, engineers, teachers, artists, and above all, happy and fulfilled individuals. Over the years, Ethan developed his own voice, but still prefers sign language for important moments, because it was in silence that he learned to truly listen to children's needs and find ways to meet them. His story became a book, a documentary, and an inspiration for public policies. Yet he still wakes up early every morning to check if there's a new child waiting at the school door, because he knows every new arrival is another chance to make a difference. And Father Michael, now 80 years old and retired, still comes every Sunday to watch the children's performances at the church. He always says that the morning he decided to follow a mute boy was the most important decision of his priesthood, because he discovered that miracles don't have to be supernatural. Sometimes they're just one generous heart finding another in need, and the two deciding to work together to make the world a little better. The end of the story. What an incredible story, isn't it? Ethan taught us that limitations can turn into superpowers when we find our life's purpose. What did you think of his journey? Do you know someone who overcame similar challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one.